some really interesting points here, and I'm going to just add to it. Mark, you're absolutely correct. The wave was already happening. Generative AI is an absolute accelerant in many ways. But when you think about it in B2B sales specifically, across multi-industry here, not just tech, but all B2B sales, the average amount of time the buyers actually spend with the end companies that are trying to sell to them is only 19% of their buy sequence. So if you take a totality of the time that they're out there trying to buy or solve a problem, they're actually only spending 19% of that time talking with vendors, consultants, other people like advisors, analysts to try to figure the stuff out. So 81% of that is they're researching on their own. They're talking with peers. They're doing all these other things. They're now hopping on generative tools and querying questions because it's easier than ever to ask questions. And so, that's a big mismatch because Elizabeth, to your point of an SDR, and Mark was kind of saying the same thing. You think of that top of the funnel component, everybody's trying to sell something. You've already lost if you're approaching your go-to-market as trying to sell something at that stage, because the buyer, by the time they get to you, is already further along in their process anyway. So we're literally setting go-to-market people up for failure. We are not setting them up to meet the moment. Like Elizabeth or Mark or Julia or Justin, if somebody cold called you today, and you actually took the call, are they really equipped to understand your backgrounds, the level of sophistication of what you're looking at, the question you're going to need? Are they prepared to deal with all of those things that come up to actually help them rise to the occasion of having a meaningful conversation with you or with me? Probably not. I'm probably going to be aggravated and go, no, I don't need that right now. Email me. And that's it, right? You push it off. So I'm a bit of an optimist. So Elizabeth, I hear you on the displacement. I do think it creates displacement, but I also think we're actually at a bit of a potential renaissance here of relationship sales, relationship go-to-market strategies actually becoming front and center again, but not because of the classic Rolodex, but actually because we now, for the first time, have an easy way to augment every GTM function with better intelligence, better data to help people rise to the occasion of a conversation. And if I'm a buyer and you're actually helping me as opposed to selling to me, I'm going to spend more than that 19% of the time with you. Mm-hmm. So, as you think of it that way, yes, there's displacement, but if you were to advise a company or think of a company today, one, is that the right approach in the near term? Two, how would you approach that? Thoughts there, Elizabeth?
I'll let Mark start on this one.
Okay. Mark, you're up.
Okay. Well, look, you're talking about points that are spot on. Nobody wants to be sold to. And in most situations, the contacts that you're reaching out to have different problems within the organization. But today's buyers are all a part of a consensus group. So if you're an enterprise seller, a larger ticket item, you're coming into an organization where you might not go right for the economic buyer, right? You're going to need to come in, around the edge to other people that are influencing the decision. So leveraging these tools throughout that orchestration across all the go-to-market capabilities becomes the way for your message to resonate. Because as you are not engaging that other 80% of the time, they're in meetings talking to each other. They're sending emails back and forth about challenges that they believe are in front of them to accelerate. And if you're touching more than one of these people in the consensus group with different messaging at the same time, you're now becoming the thought leader that's helping them look better inside the consensus group. So it is about the orchestration. It is about getting more research and information, because half the problem that I have with any type of cold outreach is that people haven't demonstrated that they understand my business and they don't understand me. And those are the first two things that have to happen before I can believe that they understand the challenges that I have in front of me right now. And that's the only way you're going to get time with me. It does bring up an interesting point where referral marketing, building your network and getting people to help you with those introductions. How does Gen AI help you to better understand those relationships and how you need to approach the person who's going to bring you in? But that would be my response.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, so similarly, I think that we're in a situation where, again, it's going to be the more repeatable processes that are replaced, right? It's going to do wonders for marketing in terms of content marketing, market analysis, customer segmentation, lead generation, personalizing marketing campaigns. All of that is going to be helped tremendously with the AI. But I think what we're going to see is we're going to see more on the enterprise level and the more senior level people. It's going to be even more important to have that vulnerable, authentic voice where human judgment and understanding of the nuanced context is going to be more and more important. And we're hearing a lot of people in kind of the sales world talk about your network is your net worth, right? So we're going to have to see people really separating themselves because it's going to be very noisy. And there's again, we're in a position where buyers it's very, very different. I started out back when carrying a bag was carrying a bag as an investment mutual fund wholesaler, calling on stockbrokers. And, it's one of the big differences about technology is buyers, even before generative AI, buyers are coming to the table 80% more educated on their product before you even get into the conversation, right? So we're going to see that increase rapidly, and the information that people have at their hands is going to be it's going to skyrocket. It's going to be really, really different. And so people are not going to be trusting information as much. And so the way people are going to be buying is they're going to be going to their network, and it's going to be saying, hey, Julia, have you used this product or that product? And, because that's going to be your reliable source. And so I think what we're going to have to see from kind of the more high level leadership side of go-to-market is that we're going to have to really double down on that human touch in order to kind of offset all of the automation.
So,
If I could,
go ahead.
Just thoughts that are being triggered in the conversation here. We could also break this out into categories of business, right? How does Gen AI help go to market in an early stage company, in a company that's starting to scale from founder-led to more of a scalable audience, a much larger company that may have to defend themselves from new technology that's coming in. And this becomes that accelerator for the knowledge. And when you think about product, and a lot of times people forget the influence or the need of input from product into go-to-market. But having these Gen AI bots set up where the salespeople and the marketers, but also the customers, can ask very specific questions on that website into a very specific AI bot that has all of the data about the product. Now you're being able to take questions from customers that might not fit the sales literature and get a precise answer back. And perhaps ask questions up front about the industry they're in, the challenges they're trying to solve. So now the models are even more improved to answer the question that somebody has. Because a lot of buyers don't want to talk to a salesperson, a consultant, a strategist until they're ready. So you may miss the opportunity if your website and your sales collateral don't answer the question. But as we look to scale organizations and to leverage go-to-market to grow your business, you run into a situation where if you're not one of the top performers, how do you get that information and build your own confidence so that when you have the opportunity to speak to a buyer, you have at your fingertips all the prompts you need to get the relevant information to speak as an expert for the challenges that they're trying to solve. So I think right there, that becomes the win. And it's going to raise revenue, and that rising tide helps the entire organization.
I think that's, I'm going to build on that a little bit, Mark, because one of the definite trends that's happening in the market right now, there's a lot of buzz around what we'll call artificial intelligence sales assistants, right? Kind of next gen chatbots in essence, right? And they are being built using private large language models to your point. So I'm taking a bunch of content proprietary to me, and I needed to be in a private large language model because I can't go push that out into a general ecosystem. One, because it may get hallucinations. Two, it's competitive IP, and I don't want it sitting in a general system, right? So, that's a really big deal, and it's very helpful. It's not just helpful to the buyers, because it's giving more intelligence, more exact information available to them when they're interfacing with the company's digital assets, right? Whether through the web or somewhere like that. They now have a robust assistant that can help them. But I think to your point and to Elizabeth's point earlier, you think of anybody in a go-to-market function, it is about meeting the buyer expectation. Well, that's giving a knowledge base to be really successful with, right? And I think you bring up an interesting point of small versus large companies. Large companies is equally as germane. You think of an enterprise company today, an average seller could easily be representing a portfolio of more than 1,000 products. Julia, when you deal in mutual funds, thousands of items at any given time, right? Nobody can actually understand all of that. Yet we run enablement, we do all these other things, and we train, but people don't retain the information. Remember that people forget 73% of everything they learn every 30 days, right? People are going to forget 3/4 of what they learned on this call by the end of the month. That's just the reality. And so, that how do I take something like a virtual sales assistant, a private large language model, train it on specific aspects? So as I'm out there, and let's just use the mutual fund example, Elizabeth, I'm now actually able to immediately tap into the precise results of any given component that's needed there to better service that end client. I'm able to instantly say, oh, you're interested in said investment strategy? Here's exactly what that would do on your portfolio, right? Like hyper personalized. And what excites me so much about that is I don't need a $250,000 a year high-end enterprise sales rep to actually do that anymore. I can now augment lower cost resources in a more robust way if I go invest in building private large language models and training that way. And that's going to give a real rise to these augmented virtual assistants, I think, throughout the buying process.
Right.
Agree? Disagree?
Yeah, I would say so. The AI company that I worked for led the sales organization. We had a big team, and one of the challenges, and this is where I think it's going to start at the bottom, and we're going to see it evolve tremendous. We already have in the last year, right? But one of the challenges that we ran into selling this, and we walked into literally the C-suite executives of 100 Fortune 500 companies, and had conversations with some a lot of different people on this. And one of the biggest things we hear is so many people have been burned on first generation chatbots. And so they're not trusting that information, right? And so when you're getting into, and we were, to give you some context, this was for customer support. So this was automating, customer support chatbots for companies. And this was a next gen, but we really had trouble selling it into these organizations because so many people have had bad experiences with these bots in the past. So, again, we're going to see what companies are going to need to do. Companies that are not actively investing in AI will be at risk for being left behind quickly. And people who are not actively learning AI are also at risk for being left behind quickly. But what companies are going to have to do is they're going to have to break into it. There's really two areas that they can look at utilizing AI. They can build it into their own product offering, or they can leverage, GTM tech that uses AI. Right? Those are the two ways. And the best way for them to break into that is to really look at use cases, right? So if you look at an organization, rather than just say, hey, we're going to automate all of our mutual fund strategy so that we can personalize, that's a pretty big undertaking. And I know it's going to happen quickly because of the way it's advancing, right? But for people to trust that information, they're going to have to start with use cases, and they're going to start with the simplest ones, which is, sales emails, marketing campaigns, positioning and differentiation, content, a lot of SEO. There is a lot of AI getting into the more creative things like creating decks and images and charts and all of that sort of thing. So, I think if the companies that really want to separate themselves need to really break it down on what use cases are the low-hanging fruit in order to make this change.
So as we think about this going forwards, I think we're all agreeing we need to, companies need to embrace this. They need to use this. They need to be evaluating generative AI. It's going to disrupt people. It's going to disrupt functions. And to Mark's point, this has already been going. This is just the accelerant on all that. But also the rubber hits the road where people put their dollars. So I'm going to ask you both here, kind of do a quick rundown on a yes, no. And let's go through roles and functions. If you were advising a company today that had to go grow 50% this year, let's say 30% this year, they got to allocate their budget. You're a global head of sales. Where are you putting your dollars? Because it's all great that we talk about the impact here, but I think the reality is, what you often see in companies is they love the idea of all of these things, but the tried, tested, true formula of people in seats and calling and dialing and driving marketing volume, they kind of know works. And they sit there and go, I'm not quite sure yet. So where would you put your dollars, right? So let's go through it first. So you got to grow 30% this year. Are you investing? And I'll say invest disproportionate amounts. So you're going to over invest on your budget in these functions. AEs, sales reps, over invest to hit that growth number? Yes or no in 2024?
No.
Elizabeth?
No.
SDRs.
Absolutely not.
Elizabeth, no?
Can we just yes, no, or can I expand on that?
Go for it. I'll do yes, no, but short expansion.
Yeah, so my answer to both of those is no as well. And 2024 and moving forward, it's all about efficiency.
Yep.
So I think companies are going to be, even if they're not going to hit their 30% increase, they won't mind that if they can decrease their costs by 50%.
Okay. Demand gen in marketing. Invest, oversize invest, yes or no?
Invest, but not overinvest.
Invest in AI.
As you think of now the post-sale side, because a lot of expansion and revenue comes from cross-sell, upsell, invest in customer success, customer service?
Yes.
Customer service AI, customer success when it comes to renewals and expansion in reps.
Okay. Let's go ops. I'll use the tagline of RevOps, but some companies could have sales ops with marketing ops, different functions there. So let's just go broadly ops. Are we going to invest in headcount in ops?
Yes.
That was in unison. I love
That's
it.
going to be the most critical role.
Yeah.
Well, we've known each other for half an hour now, so now we can pick up on each other's.
So there's a bunch more there we could go through, but it's really interesting to me that both of you have, I'm interpreting here, certainly biasing towards what I will say are functional roles that would use, in this case, AI technologies that are going to create the efficiency and or the scale, the productivity investments. They were pretty firm no's to the, hey, I'm just going to add headcount to go do the engagement side. I agree for what it's worth. But I also know, the average company today, if you take a maturity scale of 1 through 5, 5 being they're fully AI functional, like hyper automated there, 1 being they're the opposite end of that spectrum, the global average is like 1.4. We're talking about things here where like these seem so like we're talking about populating Mars, most companies don't even know how to get off Earth. They haven't built a rocket yet, right? And so how, given that we all agree you need to focus on the productivity, the workflow, the augmentation, you need to be looking at AI, man, how do we convince people to not just charge after the traditional headcount?
Well, I would ask the question, did it work last year? Is that how you got your 30% growth last year, right? And more often than not, especially right now, the answer is going to be no. The other point to focus on is it's February 7th, I believe. And the question you're asking really should have been asked on July 7th last year, because this is not something that you can just say, we're going to start today and start to make this investment, because most of these things are organizational shifts, right? It's business transformation that has to happen. But just because AI is the new shiny object in the corner, it doesn't mean that we walk away from the fundamentals. It doesn't mean we don't capture data about what worked, what didn't work. But the bottom line is, unless you're a startup, an early stage startup, the 30% you're asking for is already in front of you. It's already in front of the prospects that you're talking to. It's already inside your customers to grow. The other variable is, how are you going to leverage Gen AI to help customer success reduce and eliminate preventable churn? Because, if you want to hit 30% growth, but there's going to be churn, well, that's a hole that you have to fill to hit your 30% growth. So that's another question. And right now, when all of these companies across sales, marketing, customer success, and product across these components of go-to-market are developing their tools that use AI, these are all just point solutions. And the value is going to come from the orchestration of that data, which really leans heavily on ops, because somebody needs to say, A, am I getting quality, consistent data? And then what is the data telling me? But 30% is a number for most companies that are accelerating or on a path where they have a true ideal customer profile and a solid product, should be able to get that from their customers, the prospects they're already talking to, and really asking the question, when I look at all of that, how am I dealing with partner-led sales if they have an approach where if they help a partner, it grows their business? Or what is the driving force of unity? Because if I can get that inertia going, the 30% produces itself. So I think it's really separate from the Gen AI conversation.
When we were talking a little bit about, the segment, whether it's enterprise or startups, I think the bigger thing at play, touching Alistair on what you were saying is industry. Market vertical. And I think that's going to vary a lot too, right? Because you've got, different industries that adopt technologies a lot faster than others, right? If you're in technology or SaaS and those are going to be the companies that are going to be changing and adopting and, growing rapidly. Whereas, if you've got somebody that's really selling into government or selling into healthcare, some of the industries that are a little bit slower to adopt these things, it's going to be a different process, right? But again, I think that comes back to the point of generating efficiencies and productivity and generating revenue. We're going to see a huge chasm in how companies adopt this and what the impact is on their bottom line.
Yeah. I think it's a fantastic perspective from both of you on that. And I want to go into now what I'll call the dark side of generative AI. So for all of what it can do, and it really can be, this is one of those 10x multiplier moments for go-to-market. It's, I think we've been establishing, over the last half an hour plus here. But it's not a fun topic. It's dry. It's boring. But compliance, governance, the rise of the new AI standards ethics that just happened in Europe, what we're looking at in America, it's all great to use these technologies, but most right now leverage public systems. Companies aren't going to go build a $1 billion generative AI model in-house. Most of the vendors are leveraging the public systems. The compliance and governance side of this is absolutely going to be front and center. Right. And a lot of people right now in the rush to achieve the productivity are negating that piece of it. And I would just give you like a really broader AI, not just generative AI, but kind of tactical example of this. You have both cultural and you have legal risks with this. So in Germany, as an example, culturally, people don't love to have conversations recorded. In go-to-market these days, it's best practice to kind of record conversations, have it, because the analysis, the insights, and all of those things you can get off of recorded conversation. But in that, there also comes inherent risk of having things on the record and inside there, right? Official things, you need declaration with people that, they're aware of what you are doing inside that. In America, we have TCPA rules for things like that. And now you look at what's happening with AI, and a lot of that, while it is there, people aren't really thinking through, well, how am I ensuring that anything I produce comes from a cited source? It's all great that as Microsoft has come and said, hey, use our systems, we got you covered, right? Everything just will absorb any risk. I'm happy you're absorbing the risk, Microsoft. But at the end of the day, if my company messes up, my company still messes up, and I take the lion's share of the hit, right? Like it's a real reputation risk. There's real potential damage that these technologies and AI can do without a very firm grasp of the legal laws, the compliance standards, and the governance rules that you're going to put into place. Working with the CIO counterpart has never been more critical for go-to-market leaders. And yet, in my experience, most seldom even call the CIO, apart from when they want to deploy a technology. How do we deal with this side of it? What do we need people to be thinking through on compliance and risk and AI?
Mark, do you want to start?
Sounds like a business opportunity. So it's certainly an open door that companies will look to come in and provide a service to help with. But each company has to make these decisions on their own. Each company has to determine, what's the level of risk that they're willing to take across each one of these categories. And, I certainly see how when you talk about recording calls and taking transcripts and putting things on record, that's very high up on the list. But many of the other things we've talked about today, I think most companies would have very low on the list. They're gathering information from public sources, that are available on the internet. They're capturing information that, about a business from what they're saying about themselves. They're capturing information about what people are posting in publicly available statements about the health of the business, or what analysts are saying, or what individuals inside the business are posting. So I think those are very low. But again, it needs to be front and center in any conversation around go-to-market. And it needs to be each business deciding what level of risk across each one of these categories. And then once you come up with that prioritization, you can look at the things that are the highest risks and say, how do we mitigate the risk to our business if we're going to use some of it?
Yeah. So this is, I don't want to get the wrong impression here. I'm very excited about AI, and I think there's so much ahead of us. But as I started out, I have concerns, and it's all changing so rapidly. And one of the things I think that I've had experiences in a number of companies, learning about all this, and it frightens me to a certain degree. And I remember sitting at HelloSign years ago with some of the engineers over lunch, and we were talking about the automated cars, the cars that were, autonomous cars, and they're being programmed by engineers who are having to make, moral decisions like, do you pull over and hit a telephone pole and kill the person in the back seat, or do you hit 3 people that are jaywalking, and these are decisions that are being made, right? And I know it's a little bit different with AI, but, I've had conversations with CEOs that are in the AI space and talking about like diversity. I care a lot about women in leadership and women in technology and speak a lot on that. And the algorithms, the big question that would come up is there bias in AI, right? Is the information accurate? The algorithms aren't biased, it's the data sets, right? It's the information that's being consumed that is generating the AI, right? So, it's all happening so quickly. And I think that, you have to trust the information. And I think there's so much information out there, particularly in go-to-market, and you're talking about top of funnel, and people are not necessarily trusting it. They're not necessarily trusting those first generation chat bots that, are giving out bad information, right? So it's developing that trust with people. And it concerns me about what could be done by AI that's getting into the wrong hands.
There is, I would just say this, Elizabeth, there absolutely is bias without question in the models. And those of us that are in the space and building these models need to be acutely aware of that and need to be radically assessing and looking at how you're weighting different aspects of the data inside there. And that's an entire whole topic itself, which I will resist going wildly down, but we have to.
Just to tap on that. So one of my friends is AI CEO, African-American male. And we were talking about this conversation at one point, and then, it was so interesting because he said, I care very much about diversity and, want to make sure that I'm developing AI that is, not biased. And yet at the same time, I'm a business owner. And so if you're talking about a customer support bot, and let's take mutual funds, for example, if you do studies and you do your market research, consumers are like 80%, I don't know if that number is accurate, but more likely to give their social security number to a woman than to a man over the phone. So you're going to name your bot Mary and not John, right? And as a business owner, you want your consumers to trust the data, so there's a lot of moral decisions that need to be made.
There really is on that side. I'm going to bite slightly and just give one final example, as I know we're getting near the top of our hour here, so I want to be cognizant of time. But about 3 years ago, okay, might have actually been 4 now. I happened to be a Gartner at the time, and this is now public information, but we were looking at bias in AI models. Daryl Plummer, distinguished analyst over there, was one of the leads on this. And at the time, it was the example that was used to bias coming out of COVID as just a tactical example. And there was I won't say the vendor, but I would say a global OEM in the cloud space, their data set. And you would take a picture of, let's say, Mark, I'm just going to pick on you. Mark holding up a temperature, remember the temperature thermometers we were putting up to people's heads during COVID to go into places? We put that up, and you would take a picture of Mark doing that, and it would identify successfully Mark holding a temperature thermometer. You take the exact same picture of Mark, but we change his skin tone to black, and it recognizes that temperature thermometer as a gun. Simply because of the training data and the images that it was trained on behind the scenes. So, as I said, that is an entire topic on itself, but I would just tell people that bias is prevalent. How do you solve bias? You solve bias through choice as a leader to fundamentally weight the systems better, right? AI are by nature a self-learning, self-aware models that cannot be, you can't ratchet them down so much they will have no bias, but you can certainly control aspects of the bias, and you have to be prepared to make that decision and the consequences that means on your business if you believe that is a problem for society. I'm going to do one final comment, and then last word, Mark, for you and Elizabeth. Several months ago, I was fortunate to speak at another event, and there's always, like we started, is AI going to replace jobs? I believe it's going to augment and create new jobs. But I'm going to give the prolific example of impact with just ChatGPT, because everybody talks about ChatGPT and everybody knows what it is now from OpenAI. In November of 2021, ChatGPT, the little search engine that everybody likes to query with now, had an estimated IQ of 55. By July of 2023, an estimated intelligence of 150. For perspective, Albert Einstein had an IQ of 160. If you use standard compounding maths, which we do in technology to forecast where things will be, that roughly means that within about another 2 years, that technology has the capability of being 2,000 to 3,000 times the IQ of any single human being. As you just think about that for a second, that's just ChatGPT. It's cool. I love it, but it is what it is. It's not solving huge world problems at this point. But all of these models, many of us in the space are building more and more of this. Go-to-market functions are the way humans connect, the way we buy, the way we work together is ripe for disruption, and these technologies are doing that. But disruption, I believe, is actually going to make for the better. But final word for you. Mark, I'll let you go first, and Elizabeth, bring us home.
Yep. So a great entrance into our final words here. I agree with what you're saying. For me, if I focus on the topic of the day, will it replace go-to-market functions? No. The gap in the hole in go-to-market has gotten so large over the last 12 to 18 months that it's going to help us to keep up. And that means more jobs focused on go-to-market and a better product. And what it really comes down to is original content. And some people are concerned that this is going to be the end of original content, right? And everybody's just going to depend on what Gen AI is producing. But to your point about the IQ of Gen AI, what about the IQ of the people that want to learn more, right? If we compared a data set of people and said, I just want to benchmark your IQ today. Don't learn anything. Don't read anything. Just go about your business for the next year, and I'm going to check your IQ again. Versus the same set of people or a similar set of people where you benchmark their IQ, and a year later you tell them you're going to read X number of books, articles, you're going to ask X number of questions all day, every day from a trusted, valid source. Got to qualify it there. And then I'm going to check your IQ at the end of the year. Odds are that their IQs have gone up. So if we look at these tools as a way to help people who want to generate original content, to make their businesses better, to solve the go-to-market problem, then the more intelligent the tools get, the more resources we have to increase our ability and our intelligence as well.
Alistair, we're not far from singularity, to your point on, the intelligence increasing. I think that it will potentially increase jobs, but I think we're going to see that profound change in job functions. And, we're going to see, unfortunately, in my opinion, I think we're going to see people who are really vulnerable, people that are maybe struggling and falling behind now already. When you look in these cities and you look at the homeless problems and the desperation that people have, we're going to see a wider gap there. And that frightens me. And, one of the things, it was actually Will.i.am, who's very savvy in technology, was speaking recently on, we are investing billions and billions and billions of dollars into AI right now. We're not spending anything on HI, human intelligence, and the state of our, education system. And, so I think that's my big concern. I do believe wholeheartedly that we will see jobs created in the longer term. I think in the shorter term, it's all about efficiencies, and we're going to see companies continuing to supplement employees with AI, and probably continue to see more layoffs in 2024 would be my opinion, just based on the fact that everybody's focused on efficiency. But long term, I think AI will create new jobs, and maybe jobs that we didn't even know existed yet. But I think we're going to see a broadening gap between the types of roles. And, I think it's going to be, we're going to see an increased challenge at more of the entry level areas.
Well, Mark, Elizabeth, I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation here today on this. And I think your perspectives are both valid and unique, and I'd encourage everybody to continue to explore those. Julia, Justin, thanks for having us all on here. I know we're getting to the top of the hour, and I have no idea how you're going to determine between Mark and Elizabeth who the winner is. In my books, you're both winners, but hey, I'll leave it up to Julia. You and Justin take us home from here.
Thank you so much for the phenomenal conversation, debate, Alistair, Mark, Elizabeth. Alistair, I've been following you, I think, like for a decade now, with all of the insights back from the times from Gartner and the statistic that you brought in the beginning of the show. I'm sure that Mark and Elizabeth and Justin, you keep hearing it for years and years and years. 1/3 of the time of sellers is only spent selling, actually. I remember like the CEO of Inside Sales actually published it. Maybe he was the first, maybe it's Gartner, maybe it's Salesforce, no idea. I know you know, Alistair, but we kind of tend to allocate, just a question, we tend to allocate a statistic and that problem to technology, AI, and like the lack of technology and solutions. And it all started with data integration, synchronizations, and Salesforce autofill and stuff like that. But an interesting data point that we actually found out in our community is this. So we run this months ago, and those are the biggest risks for the upcoming year. And we were really surprised to, Elizabeth, your point, lastly, the human intelligence piece, that's the biggest risk for all of our community members, majority of them. So curious your thoughts about this, and do you even see now with all of the sales enablement, AI enablement, like tools like platforms, revenue.io, I mean, it's all there. People can leverage it now. It's not like 5 years ago, and still the same statistic dominates the industry. So is it about HY now?
Well, I think you're right, Julia. Like so couple key points on that data, right? It has held pretty concretely for the better part of half a decade between 16 and 19% in terms of the buyer engagement piece, right? So it's not moved, and that we've seen that before COVID, during COVID, post COVID, Gen AI, right? Like it's just always in that range. And a lot of it is exactly to the point that you bring up and the community brings up. It's meeting a buyer expectation. It's actually just being helpful to a buyer. The world isn't about anymore helping sellers sell exclusively. It's helping buyers buy. And if you think of it in that frame, as I look at technologies, I always look at the technology to say, is this technology creating more busy work where I'm going to require somebody to train and learn? Or is it actually helping them to engage and meet the occasion? And I think what you're going to see is a bit more of a trend towards the engagement side, because we just forget a lot of stuff. That's it at the end of the day. And I love enablement. I think some of the enablement vendors are some of the best in class that are out there today. Some of the LMS systems, like they really have come a long way. But micro-learning, micro-narratives, and that rapid augmentation, it's as true in sales as it is in school, as it would be in university. Like it's just the way the human mind works. You have to understand that the chemistry of the mind and go, if to the point, everybody's worrying about how am I going to train my sellers to be better? I'd actually say yes, but don't forget how you're going to help your buyers be better. If you actually answer that question, you'll get the answer to the former, in my opinion.
Anything to add, Elizabeth, Mark? Just want to be respectful of your time. I know that we're on top of the hour.
I'll leave the last word to you, Elizabeth. I couldn't have said it better myself. That's my experience. We have to help the buyers to buy. We have to help them see how we can help them. And then we have to make it easy for them to accept the help and understand that the help's available.